Now, hi everybody, and welcome to our fireside chat here with Bill, who is, I believe, in Austin, Texas. How are you doing today,
Correct. Bill? I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. I'm currently in Colorado for a little while longer, so on the same part of the earth.
Yes.
Excellent. And so Bill is a mental projector, and you're also a homeschool father. Is that right?
That's correct.
Super. There's been an interesting little discussion, which seems ongoing, which has been a bit active again today about this thing about projectors being parents. So I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit with you later, and really interested to hear how you do that as a parent. And as a homeschooler, I'm a teacher too, so that's really interesting to me. Let's start at the beginning. So, as a projector, when did your journey begin with human design? Like, when did you first find out that there was something called a projector and that you were one?
Well, it was about 3 months ago. So, after we're talking, one was really into human design and was telling my other friend, who was a very close friend, about human design and sort of looking up her type and explaining and at the same time wondering what my type was, because she was sure that I was a projector. She's a projector, my friend who's into human design. And so as soon as I got the word that I should look up my chart, I love to know what type I am in any system, astrology, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. So I thought, oh, good, another system to look into. I looked it up and I found out I was a projector, and I saw the strategy waiting for the invitation, and it made sense. And then it was a bit of a letdown immediately too, because it was sort of this feeling of, you mean I can't take any action to, even though I'd already come to the realization that major relationships, jobs come to me through invitations. So still, I see that a lot. It seems like a lot of people have that initial letdown. You mean I can't do anything about this? I have to just sit and wait. And so
right, because we come from a world where it's the value is put on going out and making things happen and working hard to get ahead, which may be relevant for some manifestors or for some generators. But for us as projectors, it's not not our way, right?
Right. Apparently not.
So you've been in for 3 months. So wow. So it sounds like you've dived deep in, and it's interesting that you mentioned the thing about enjoying systems as a projector, because that's obviously something that as projectors and I think especially as projectors with that 2343 channel that I have as well, the channel of structuring, I do feel that is a something that but as projectors we work really well with systems, and you obviously mentioned that you've dived into a few other systems as well. So 3 months is a short time. How has it been so far diving in for you?
Well, it's been a lot of information, and I've just been sort of absorbing it. And it's interesting because I was thinking of the other channel that I have, which is, I can't remember the numbers.
You've got the channel of abstraction, the 6447.
Yeah. And so
joining up your head and your ajna.
It doesn't have to do with the downloading of information and sort of swimming in the confusion until something, maybe insight comes, maybe it doesn't.
I've got the one on the other side, which is the channel of logic, which is they're both in the collective circuitry. So I don't know that one as well, but it sounds like that's you're tying that in with how you're processing information and
that's how I'm feeling. Yeah, I'm just sort of downloading it all, take it all in, bring it, just keep it coming, and then eventually something things crystallize here and there. And a lot of times when they crystallize is in these discussions in the online.
Ooh.
And yeah, often more so than from reading, although that's helpful too. So it's a lot of information, a lot of diving in. There's, of course, I go for, I always like the minutia in these systems too. So I tend to go for the advanced details earlier than maybe I should, but I just like to take it all in and see what.
I guess it's a really interesting thing that we haven't really talked about yet in any of these chats, is the way that we digest and process information, and the way that, you know, and human design is so interesting, isn't it? Because it's, I mean, there aren't that many systems that are so, in some ways, so simple, but in other ways so detailed, intricate, and complex and deep that, you know, even just reading all the information could take years, and actually absorbing the information probably decades, and living it fully probably a lifetime at least. So
yeah. And there's a lot of exploring, I think, because a lot of it seems to have not been defined initially and seems to have had to been fleshed out by the community. Sort of, what does this mean? So, sort of like the mental projector's authority. It seems like that was never really spelled out initially, and people had to figure out, well, what is the authority for the mental projector?
It does seem a bit nebulous, and it doesn't seem clear that, you know, when you, it's not like when you talk, like, you know, if you talk to emotional authority people, they all say, oh yeah, we're supposed to wait out the wave, and there's no truth in the now. They're kind of like little sound bites, aren't they?
Yes.
Whereas the sounding board, there seem to be some different ways of interpreting it. So how is that? Like, have you heard different things from different people in the community, or have you been experimenting? Obviously, been experimenting yourself. Like, how have you gone with that so far? The sounding board.
Well, it's well, what I heard initially, I think, is what I'm hearing is it seems like is the self projector method, which is where you talk to some friends and it doesn't really matter what they say. You're just listening for the truth in your own body. And that's what I thought it was initially, but now I guess it has to do, you are looking for some response from them. I don't know, I'm still figuring it out. It's kind of confusing, and it's also kind of challenging because to do this sort of talking with one or two close friends, and they're not always available. And as a man in our culture, it's difficult to have these conversations with other men. Often they don't want to talk about things that are personal or emotional,
or maybe as men, we go into that kind of fixing it kind of mode, don't we? Like, right, what's
that's true too. Yeah.
Here's
what you need to do. Yeah. So,
yeah.
So it's challenging in that way. Yeah. But I'm working on it anyway. And people suggest other things like Voxer, I guess, is an app where you can talk sort of walkie-talkie style and record messages, and then people can come back later. I don't know. That sounds kind of, it doesn't really appeal to me right now. So, but that's one way that people have tried, or some people say, try writing in your journal. It's not quite the same either, because you're not getting that when you're talking.
So from what you're saying, you do find value in having someone hear you talk and be able to speak something out.
Definitely. And in hearing myself speak my thoughts, very valuable for me. Yes. And
so then the question is that it sounds like you know there's different advices. That are you wanting to just hear what's going? Are you speaking to hear your own voice, or do you want some specific feedback from the other person? And if so, what kind of feedback do you want?
It seems to be both. Sometimes I appreciate the reaction, and sometimes it's unwanted advice. But Yeah, I'm really early on in the soundboarding experimentation.
Right, right, right. Yeah, it's nice. It sounds nice to keep it open and to figure it out. And it makes sense, especially if you're 3 months in, to be like, hey, I'm trying it out, I'm experimenting it, rather than yep, this is how it works.
Yes, but I still have responses in my body, and so I am wondering, what are these? You know, if my authority is out, you know, is through the other, then what are these? You know, the gut feelings or the you know, intuitive responses.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that, for example, that someone like John Martin talks about, he's someone that I highly respect and I've had some time with recently, but he says that it's all about the truth being in the body, not the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, in human design, we have this thing about the mind being the not self, and the mind can, I think most of us can acknowledge this thing of like the mind thinking one thing one moment, the next something else the next moment, and it's like it doesn't have that kind of consistency and depth and kind of yesness to it that the feelings in the body have. So
Right.
whether it's emotional authority, where like Raluca's emotional authority, gathering that information over a period of time, which can have different inputs. um, you know we've got these 26 gate activations, so each one of those is of course going to be having little movements of energy throughout the whole body. And one of the things, like to my understanding, we put a lot of focus on the centers that are defined. And, it's like you have 3 centers defined. Let's pop up your body graph so that people
Okay.
watching can see. So obviously being a mental projector means you have nothing defined below the throat. And out of the 3 possible centers, you have all 3 defined. So
Right.
that's the most definition that you've probably seen mental projectors who've just got the bottom 2 of those or
Yes.
the top 2 of those. So
Yes.
you've got the most definition as far as centers possible. So then, of course, you've got these 6 undefined centers. One of them is totally open. That's the spleen over on the left, with not a
Mm-hmm.
single gate activation. And it's very people often come into human design and they're like, oh well, people say to them, oh, you've got this and you've got that, but you haven't got that. And it's
Right.
actually not strictly speaking correct, because we all have everything. We all have all 36 channels, all 64 gates, and all 9 centers,
Yes.
but they work in different ways. So obviously, as a mental projector, everything below your throat being undefined, it's like we seem to value the yang aspects, that sort of masculine defined aspect of centers and of life, where these
Yes.
yin centers are more powerful even, where we have the capacity to be receptive and to amplify what's coming towards us. So it makes sense that you'll feel stuff in your body that's part of your truth.
Yeah.
How did that land? This thing of like, actually below my throat, all my centers are undefined, like this yin thing. How does that fit with your experiences before human design?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was another one of those things that at first was a little bit of a disappointment, but I think there's a lot of I think of them as word traps in human design, where maybe the right word wasn't chosen. So to find out I'm a mental projector, my first thought is, oh, I'm all in my head. Is that what that means? And so, and then to think of that in the sense of, or to think, oh, I'm all in my mind, and then to think, oh, the mind can't be trusted. It's kind of a weird feeling, you know. So, so I'm having to rethink it somewhat, and from my first impression of, oh, I'm a mental projector.
Yeah, that makes sense. What you're saying. If someone says, "Hey, you're a mental projector," and the mind can't be trusted, it's kind of like, damn, where to go with
right, and
something like that. It's not
you
a.
have no authority.
Yeah, yeah, you got no authority.
So what's the point?
Yeah,
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 yeah, and also with the interesting thing with being a mental projector, you've got those six undefined centers. Have you come across the not self questions for each of those specific centers?
I have, and some of them I feel strongly about, and others not so much. So some of them I know I can feel, yes, I'm feeling that not self. I can answer yes to that not self question, and others not so much. So
They're each question to me seems like it's a process of inquiry or a meditation, or but I'm curious to know which are the ones that you found most useful or most resonant so far.
well, let's see. Well, I can't remember them all off the top of my head. I know.
I know the sacral can be a big one for a lot of people. So, how do I know when enough is enough, or do I know when
Yes,
enough is enough?
yes, that's been one. The heart question, is that the one looking for love?
The G center is where am I looking for? Like, that's the yellow
Where am I
diamond
looking? Okay,
people.
so that one.
Where am I fixated on looking for love? And then the ego, the will, the heart, they're all the same center. That's the one about being competitive. Where am I acting like I have something to prove?
Yeah, I
And
think
that's also,
I'm
yeah.
exploring that one a little bit. Yeah, some of that one. The root, not so much.
So I can speak a little on that one if it's useful. It'd be fun to dive into some of them.
What's that?
Uh, we seem to have a little bit of a time delay, but that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to say a couple of things about the will that you may or may not have come across yet. That 70% of people have the will undefined.
Wow.
So only 30% have defined. It's the same center: the ego, the will, the heart, and that's the center that you've got one gate activated, gate 51, on that center,
Yes.
which is the gate of it's the gate of
Shock.
shock, I believe. Yeah. Now, the suggestion here is that with an undefined will, it's not advisable to make promises and commit and say, yes, I'm going to get this thing done. Especially if you're not sure how it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you may well get it done. But that thing of saying, yes, I'm going to do it, and then following through can put pressure on the heart and can create, physical manifestations of heart issues. I actually been reading a biography of a guy who, a crazy guy called David Goggins, who's like one of the most hardcore physical athletes. He's actually a manifesting generator, but he has a totally open heart center, and he's been someone who pushed himself. He went through the Navy Marine SEALs training 3 times, and he actually ended up having a hole in his heart and heart operations and things. So this is the
Interesting.
question for which I don't know about you. I'm always like matching it up, going, well, let me look for evidence that this is actually the case, that this is true. So that could be an extreme example of overdoing it with the willpower. So that's the will center of not making promises.
Okay.
Then have to follow through on.
That sounds like good advice. Yeah.
But interestingly, the channel, the 2551 channel, is a very competitive channel. You've only got one of the gates. That channel across to the G center is every single emotion, every single ego projected projector has that channel. It's the channel of initiation, a design of needing to be first. It is a very competitive channel. So so there may be a tendency to that, especially if you connect with someone else that's got the 25, you might find that coming up. But the suggestion is not to make promises.
So
Not
might
have
find
to.
some competition coming up, or would someone?
Yeah, the being competitive is would probably be in the not self, but that's obviously for you to explore.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, the other person that I know that has a totally undefined, if you go back and you may have watched Thomas's interview, Thomas Weston.
I haven't watched that one yet.
Right. So he's an energy projector, and he was into endurance sports and triathlon things, and he also had issues with his heart. I think he also had a totally undefined heart center, and had some pretty hardcore issues, health issues with that. So, and he was obviously also doing those endurance type sports, which you do require quite a lot of willpower to push yourself, with some of those things. But yeah, so that's the will center. You mentioned the root as well. Did you want to say anything about that?
That one I don't feel that the answer is yes to the not self question. So, it has to do with pressure, right?
Yeah, the roots and the head are both pressure centers, which are the pressure to think and the pressure to do stuff. So it's like, where am I in a hurry to be free of the pressure? Where am I doing stuff in a hurry to be free of the pressure?
Yeah, I don't feel that so much. So maybe I've made peace with that or something. But I feel the pressure from the top, but not so much from the root.
Yeah. I mean, I know for myself that I'd already done some debugging on my sacral center long before knowing about human design. I noticed that some days some weeks I had no energy, other weeks I did have energy, and I'd already noticed that in myself. And then human design confirmed that as like, yeah, that's so it may be the same for you with the root. You may have done done meditation or something like that to notice, okay, actually I don't have to go ahead and rush action when I'm not ready to.
Yeah.
You certainly seem to be a pretty calm person.
I generally am, yes, and patient. So, yeah. And what is the question for the spleen? Since my spleen is completely open.
Yeah, the undefined spleen question is, where am I holding on to things that are not good for me?
Okay.
And what they say about a totally open center is that in its purest state, it's like a pure mirror to the other person, because you've got no gates of your own. So it's like holding up a mirror to someone else, and that they can then be more aware of. The spleen has those 7 different fears on each of the gates.
Right.
So I think it was Alyssa when she was talking about. I think she has an open spleen, and she was talking about sitting next to someone on a flight. I can't remember. It might have been someone else, but they were talking about how sitting next to someone, the other person's fears started to be spoken, and she could really feel that very amplified in her spleen. So, those splenic fears, when you're around other people, you may feel them, but then when you're not around that person, it's like that's not yours. It's you're amplifying the other person's.
Yes, I have experience. Yeah.
Do you have an example? Because it'd be fun to hear. We haven't had much experience talking to people with an undefined open spleen. I've got it defined. I'm splenic authority.
I don't know. I've recently been very aware of my vulnerability to others' emotions. And it's interesting to think that maybe sometimes that's also their fears. So I don't know if I have an example coming to mind, but
Raluca just reminded me that it was Lisa. If anyone's watching this and wants to look back, and I thought it was more recent. Lisa shared the story about sitting next to someone on an airplane.
Yes, I saw that one just the other day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely resonate with the emotional center, not self. That's a very powerful motor, the emotional center over on the right side. And if we look at your chart again, you do have quite a few gates defined on your chart over there. You've got 4 out of the 7.
Yeah.
And basically these these are both sensing centers, and they're all fears. It's like that it's all about fear. That's how the mind is what's coming into these open centers. And so the not self question is, where am I avoiding conflict and truth, or am I avoiding conflict and truth? And the thing is that someone with an emotional center defined means that center is connected to one of the other centers. So for us as projectors, it's either got to be connected to the will, or it's going to be connected down to the root.
Right.
Of course, if it's connected to the throat, we'd be a manifestor. If it's connected to the sacral, we'd be a generator. So it's one of those 4 channels that the energy can then flow along. Now, having 4 of those gates defined, you've got 3 unconscious in the red, and then you've got the 36 in the black. So what it means is that you and I'm the same. We've got those energies moving in the emotional center, but it's like there's nowhere for it to readily flow to. It's got that energy kind of like almost like stuck or static, or whereas an emotional authority person, say Raluca's got emotional authority, she's got the 1949 defined, so the energy can move at least along that one channel. So it's a different thing, and the sort of the overall picture is that someone with emotional authority is well designed to experience all these different emotions, and there's this big wave going on, and despite the fact it's not coming from us because we are undefined, it can be amplified and we can feel it really intensely. Or we may walk in a room and people with emotional authority may all of a sudden feel things more clearly they didn't feel before. Remembering that our aura as projectors is clarifying. We have this auric capacity. It's not just being a guide as far as guiding someone, like saying, hey, I think you should do this and that. It's like just by being present in a space, people can become more clear.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I guess with all those gates, there's on the I guess with all those gates hanging there, that there's lots of opportunity to be activated by others in that center. Huh?
Right, exactly. So that those hanging gates can be, you've got the so for example, you've got gate 55, the gate of the spirit, and I've got gate 39, which is a gate of provocation. So they're quite an interesting little duo that come together.
Yeah.
So I find for myself with that gate of provocation, it's one of the death gates, gate 39 there. It either goes one of 2 ways. People might find it very valuable to have that provocation, or they don't want anything to do with me.
Yeah.
Especially when there's gate 55 there, because that's got the electromagnetic connection.
Yeah.
So I've got gate 37 and 22 as well, and then you've got gate 36. So yeah, there's a lot of gates to dive into and learn.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that's very interesting, if we look at your body graph, is actually not only is your spleen totally undefined and it has no hanging gates, there are also no hanging gates pointing towards your spleen. So it's like that left side is totally white, isn't it?
Blank. Mm-hmm.
It's totally blank. So I'm curious to know about one of the things they say with someone with a defined spleen has a more robust state of health, whereas someone with an undefined spleen is more sensitive to homeopathic remedies, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe has the health things can be more of an issue. Ra talks about him having two sons who one has a defined spleen and the other has an undefined spleen, and he says the one with a defined spleen can take all the kind of conventional medicines, you know, that could deal with having all those medicines, whereas the undefined spleen son was very much more sensitive to more subtle things with their health. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that's something that.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, all my life I've dealt with sometimes a delicate constitution, been very sensitive physically to different stimuli, and yeah, conventional medicines can be very harsh on my system.
Right, that fits.
Yeah, it's led, as I've grown older, to take care of my health more carefully, to modify my diet. Yeah, now that I know I'm a projector, I'm looking more thoughtfully at my energy levels, you know, and trying not to overextend myself. And so yeah, that rings true. I mean, as a child, I had fainting spells. You know, as an adolescent, I was prone to seizures and into it. Thankfully, I don't have to do that anymore. But a lot of that is due to paying attention to my lifestyle and leading a more moderate lifestyle, which has benefited me in that way. So.
Sounds like maybe if honoring your energy levels, you know, honoring your energy is a part of that as well. Not
Yes.
overexerting yourself when there's, you know, like pushing on when it's like enough's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Not overdoing it in any realm.
I studied human design with one lady who had been in it for quite a while, and she described this polarity with the spleen between, she described it as being animal or angel. So defined spleen is very animal. It's very like, you know, like as a splenic, I identify this. I feel all these like moment to moment little fears of like, you know, and it's not like, oh, I'm afraid I have to run away, but it's like, okay, I got to keep an eye on that, and it's
right.
like this sort of
survival
thing. Survive, exactly, that old survival instinct, and it's the quickest one of the sensing centers. You know, we've got the three. We've got the spleen, we've got the emotional center, which is the slowest, and then we've got the ajna, which are all the sensing centers, but the spleen has the quietest voice. But it's the one that's really keeping us alive moment to moment.
Yeah.
And
which one's loudest?
Well, mostly the mind, I think, but the emotion.
Yeah, I think so too.
Is, in its pure sense, the emotional center is, because it's a motor. It's a big, you know, it's feeling all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, and it's almost like there's this like sort of almost like a harder incarnation for someone to find spleen. It's like we're right down here on this physical plane dealing with all these animalistic fears, whereas you know, she's saying, well, it's like this, more angelic, like, hey, I'm not really, you know, who I am isn't fully down here in this body. It's like, and there's that extra sensitivity and you know, with the health realm. So that really fits with what you shared.
Right. And I have a friend with a defined spleen, and I notice that he's very concerned with the state of the world and events, and gets very stressed out about those things.
Right. I mean, there can be not self but defined centers as well.
True.
And the thing with the spleen is that the true splenic impulse is that first little hit of adrenaline, little subtle little whisper of like, don't go there, and it's so easy to miss it. And of course, then, you know, if it's the mind coming in and it's like oh my God, the world is a dangerous place, and da 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 da. To me, I mean, I don't know, having not met your friend, but that seems more like that's the mind coming in. whereas the splenic thing is very, it's fleeting.
Yeah. Fight or flight. Huh?
Right. Something else that might be interesting to check out is people with undefined spleen can sometimes feel safe around someone who has the defined spleen. So, you know, the meerkats where they kind of like, they pop up and look around. That's just an image that stuck with me of like, you know how there's like one meerkat will pop up and be like, is there a danger here? And then other meerkats kind of follow suit, and they depend on, you know, it's like depending on other people's sense of safety and danger.
Yeah, interesting.
So I noticed my brother and I both go kite surfing, and he's got undefined spleen, and he won't go. There was like a, it's like if you have offshore wind, then if it goes wrong, you can get swept out to sea and you have to swim back. And it can be potentially dangerous because people get pulled out further than what they can swim if it goes wrong. And I there was a spot in Spain I used to love going out with this offshore thing, and I think it was my splenic authority just trusting that I could look after myself. Me and my brother are both fairly good swimmers, and he just did not want to go out. His mates didn't want to go out, and I was like, they're a bunch of pussies. Come on. And he was like, and it was almost like his sense of danger was based on his friends. Like if they weren't going out, it was too, you know, it wasn't safe for him. And I was surprised because I thought, you know, he's quite an adventurous guy, good swimmer and stuff. And then after, as I looked back at it, I was like, oh, well, maybe that's just his undefined spleen and my defined spleen. So that felt like an interesting little thing there. So that could be something to, I mean, I guess like we were saying earlier, there's so much new, some new information that's coming through here. So it's like, you know, you when you digest this new information, you either go, yeah, that resonates, or you're like, nah, I don't get that, that doesn't feel true. Or you go, right, I'll put it on the shelf and then, you know,
exactly
over time, isn't it? So, yeah. So Raluca's just shared that she relates to having a better response to natural remedies and also having to take care of her health. And she's got an open spleen as well.
Okay.
I know for me that homeopathic remedies never really seem to work. I always wanted them to work. Maybe I'm not subtle enough to pick up on those little subtle frequencies. And I do feel I can sort of, you know, I don't have to be super careful with my health. So that's interesting. So what else? We've looked at quite a few of the open centers there. We've gone through most of them. What about the sacral? We haven't talked about that yet, and I think that's you know, that feeling you described as saying, oh, I feel like I've got something. You know, it's like that disappointment of like, oh, I haven't got this, that, or the other. So for all of us as generators, no sacral.
Right.
We don't have that consistent, reliable source of life force energy. How is that for you? Like, do you notice your energy comes and goes, or is it?
It does. Yeah, it's fairly consistent, but I do have to be mindful of it. This is actually it's helped me be kind of mindful of my energy levels, knowing that I have an open sacral. So. Yeah, but sometimes I don't have energy, and I need to just accept that when I have those times, that it's not a day to go do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I hear. Sorry, I see a lot of projectors talking about how they don't have energy ever, and I don't really feel that way. It's just. There's highs and lows, and so it's good.
And do you notice a pattern? Do you feel like it's just like depends on the kind of cosmic weather, or do you find there's certain things that energize you and certain things that drain your energy? Like what have you spotted so far?
Well, I tend to get energized in social situations a lot, and sort of over energized. And so that's something I have to be I don't know. I like being in those situations. So sometimes I just get over energized, but yeah, so a lot of times if I'm out in the evening or something with friends, then the next day I may be a wreck because I can't sleep as a result, or
Right.
after.
Yeah, I don't get this so clearly as I hear other people describing it, but it's people say, well, you're picking up on other people's sacral energy, and it's not yours. And
Hmm.
yeah, Raluca's saying the same things. You know, after over socializing, not able to sleep, and it's like, yeah, it's like that energy's come into your sacral, and you're still buzzing from that
Yeah,
energy being around other people who are probably generators statistically. Um, so it can be enjoyable, it can be amplified, but then you can't sleep because it's still buzzing. I'm curious to know from people who experience this, like, what do you do to kind of clear that energy and come back to yourself? Like, if you found anything that works for that.
I haven't found a solution yet. Unfortunately, when I'm in that state, I'm just spinning through mental cycles until they stop.
Yeah, yeah,
So something I'm still working on.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So Raluca says that for her, yeah, using some, you might want to try this. She says having a bath with some salts or taking a
Hmm.
long shower, maybe like clearing that energy, clearing
Yeah.
it off.
I
Um,
find also, and this could maybe help if I had something like the app solution or something like that. But I find that a lot of times after I leave these social situations, I want to talk about what has happened. I want to soundboard, and
right.
that keeps me, because I can't. And often it's late at night. By that point, I am just spinning, trying to soundboard to myself, I guess. Maybe I should just talk out loud to myself. Might help,
Well,
instead of just hearing the thoughts in my head, you know?
right, right. That makes a lot of sense with something that Cheryl said. She's a mental projector, and
Hmm.
I was suggesting, I was saying, hey, it's all about listening to the truth in your body. And what she said was, listen, part of it is actually part of the reason for soundboarding is actually to clear some of that mental pressure, to just be
Yeah,
able to speak it out,
yeah,
and like it's like a pressure valve to just let some of that out that may be going around the head, and so that seems to fit with what you're saying right now.
yeah.
Um,
It's
that
venting.
just exactly, just venting it, just getting it out. Um, and she was saying that sometimes just like talking, then you become clear. Then she becomes clear. Um, but yeah, that's definitely. I mean, when I first heard it, the difference I heard between we're just coming back to this topic of soundboarding versus like self-projected authority. And what they have in common is that for both of them, it's healthy to express and speak. Now, one of the things is it's not just there's a difference between talking from the mind and speaking from what comes out from deep inside the body.
Yeah,
And the truth is in the body, so it's speaking directly from the body that it's coming out. And I think I can hear a difference between when someone's, some people you feel them, you hear them, there's like a gravitas with their voice, and then other
yeah,
people just like kind of like whatever's in their mind.
yeah.
um,
And sometimes when I am soundboarding, I can hear the difference in my own
in
voice.
your own voice.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this is just a bullshit thought that I'm stuck on, versus this is right.
Maybe speaking it out gives it somewhere to go so it can stop bouncing around inside your head. That could be
Yeah, yeah. And
a
sometimes
nice.
that reaction, like, I don't know if what you're saying is really true from the other person, or if you're just caught up in your head. So
Right. So you're saying you find that useful to have that kind of feedback of.
definitely. Well, sometimes and sometimes not. So going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you run into somebody's trying to give you advice to fix the situation, and sometimes they're just giving you empathy, and I don't know. So
I mean, that one you just shared just then, it felt like very different. It didn't feel, you kind of role played it. You said, I'm not sure if what you're saying is really true, or you really think that, or it's really what's true for you.
I've had that experience. Yeah. I've had experience that felt that was true. Yeah. That when somebody told me that, and known that what they were saying is right, because
it seems like a difference between listening for context and listening for content. So, like if you're talking about something in your life and I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh no, you shouldn't do that, you should negotiate a better price on that deal, or blah blah blah, and I'm kind of listening to the content of what you're saying and engaging on a content level, versus if I'm actually listening to the context, is like, do I feel like this is your truth coming out of your being, or do I feel like maybe you just need to clear a layer of thought, or I'm listening in a different way to, like, oh, Bill, I really felt you when you that thing you said about that relationship with that person. Like, I just felt like what you said was really true.
Right.
And maybe I could ask you a question and say, okay, so well, what do you think you should do next? About it based on what you said. It's more like, the listening to the context, listening to do you feel true to you, rather than the details of what, like, you should do this and tell him not to do that. And
exactly. And that seems what the soundboarding is really getting at, is finding what's true.
It's not listening to this. It's not listening to the details and giving advice. It's more about listening to, that thing where sometimes people will say, like, well, I think you answered your own question.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, I think we've learned something about soundboarding. That's good.
Yeah.
That feels cool. Raluca says she sometimes gets physical sensations in her body when someone says something that's important for them, that's their truth. So she, it would almost be like, hey, yeah, I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you. What you're saying there.
Yeah.
I guess it also depends on the relative, the person you're talking to, doesn't it? Because, like, when I talk with John Martin, he'll say to me, he'll be like, he's listening for, is this coming out of the truth in your body, or is this coming out of just your mind? And I'm splenic, but still, it's all about, am I saying shit that's really true, or is it just stuff?
Right.
And he's hardcore. He'll be at the end of the session, he'll be like, yeah, well, pretty much everything you said was just coming out of your mind, Damn. Shit, I thought I was good at this. So yeah, but you start from where you're at always, right? So
Right.
Yeah. I'm really interested to hear about homeschooling. How many kids do you have? Have you got more
I
than
have
one?
two kids, two teenagers. Actually, my daughter's grown. She's 19, and my son is almost 14. So they've never been to school, either of them.
Wow.
And it's not, the process is, we call it unschooling. So it's not what you would traditionally imagine as homeschooling, where the parents are in a teacher role and they teach lessons and things like that. It's more, it's child-led. So the kids, they follow their own interests, and then the parents are more facilitators. So, oh, you're into this? Well, let's see how we can help you get further into this, until you want to go on to something else, and then we'll facilitate that. So, and then we have community of other people doing the same thing, and with all different variations. I mean, it's very individualistic in family sense, but everyone has their own method. Some do little teaching, some do no teaching. Some are radical unschoolers where there's no bedtimes, kids eat whatever they want. So there's been a little more structure in our family life, but it's pretty loose. And that tends to set you on a path of unlearning a lot of the conditioning that you've been subject to in your own life as a parent. So
there's a journey for you as an adult to go through that and be
yeah,
like, oh, if they were in school, we'd be teaching, they'd be learning you should do this and that and the other, but why? Is that the kind of thing? Or
yeah, but also, why did I learn this? How am I affected by the way that I was schooled and parented, and what do I need to unlearn now? So it's sort of a process of deconditioning, before I learned that word, really. So
super interesting, isn't it? I guess,
yeah.
I mean, I used to be a teacher, and I got to this stage where near the end of my time in Sydney, Australia, I was there for a decade. I just used to go out and wander about of a morning, and I'd wake up really early, go watch the sunrise, and I'd see these kids from all these lovely houses overlooking the harbour, and they'd have they'd be little kids with backpacks bigger than they were, full of books.
Yeah.
And I could see them all getting in these cars and going off, driving, and you can see that, that generator buzz of cars and busyness and activity.
Yeah, shopping.
The whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And work, and then I'm looking at them all going off to school, and I'm scratching my head, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. And I mean, from a human design perspective, it's a science of differentiation. Whereas schools mostly are about homogenization, aren't they? It's like,
right.
The bell goes and you go to this class. The bell goes and you have your lunch. It's not based on, helping that child to tune into their inner authority of are you interested in this particular piece of history, or, do you
right.
need to eat something now? So,
sit down
I'm
and
always
listen.
curious.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about how would things look if we, where do we get this model from that you put 30 kids in a group together and they all do the same thing? And I love the idea of, apprenticeships, and, if you're in a tribe or a village of some sort and the kid has an interest they want to learn about welding or metalworking, there's someone they can go and spend some time with and learn those skills. Because that question of what do you use from the things you learned at school? Which are the things that are useful in your life, and which are the things that, I mean, I used to be a maths teacher, so, teaching algebra, and
yeah.
I used algebra, but hey, as a kid, when are you ever going to use simultaneous equations in real life? Yeah, it's interesting. What were your kids drawn to? Were they very different in their journeys? What things did they learn they wouldn't have learned at school?
They're very similar. They're very artistic. They like to read a lot. They're, I don't know if it's so much what they're drawn to that they wouldn't be drawn to at school, but I don't know. I see it a lot of the social aspects that they're not, that they didn't pick up from school. I see a lot of school kids. They're obsessed with being the same as each other. They become sexually active earlier. There's the whole aspect of age segregation is very prominent, so kids hang out with other kids that are exactly their same age because that's who they spend time with all the time. Whereas kids who don't go to school, they hang out with people of all ages. They're comfortable around adults. They're comfortable with young children. And they're more comfortable just out in the world, interacting with people. So, yeah. I don't think they've pursued interests that maybe school kids wouldn't, but they just have more time to do so, and also more time to just be and relax in life, and hang out in the yard or whatever. Play with a stick, as George Carlin used to say. He thought kids should spend more time just playing with a stick.
Yeah, I was in and out of school a bit, and I totally get what it's like, this thing of like kids should be doing something all the time. It's like, do you ever come across a guy called Carl Honoré? He wrote a book called The Power of Slow.
No.
And he did some case studies, and he was talking about different parenting styles. And in Scandinavia, they have some names like the helicopter parent. I think everyone knows what that one's about.
Right.
They're always just hovering over the top of the kid, waiting to kind of, intervene if the kid gets challenged or if there's something going on.
Right.
And then there was the curling one where, in the Olympics, they have the puck sliding along, and then there's someone in front furiously sweeping any little people out of the way. So,
yeah.
And of course, then the kids don't learn to deal with their own challenges and obstacles and things that might come up on their path, because the adults right there, they're helicoptering, they're sweeping, they're kind of like, providing a fake environment where there's no adversity, there's no challenge to face. And he interviewed this one woman, and this woman, her youngest daughter would insist on always getting a chair and sitting behind her mother. And it was like a really weird behavior. And they're trying to get to the bottom of, why is this little 5-year-old always putting themselves on a chair behind mum? And finally they got to the bottom of it. And she was the youngest of, I think, 3 kids. And mum was always taking them to, like, a violin practice or hockey or whatever. And the 5-year-old, she was always sitting in the SUV behind mum. And that was how she related with her mother. So, it was this thing of like sitting in the chair behind her mum was how she felt the most connected to her mother at age 5. And mum's taking all the kids from one activity to the next,
right.
like filling up the extracurricular time over and above the school time. And she was horrified when she found out that was, of course, the kid was 5, so there was hopefully time for her to have a more face-to-face relationship with her mother.
Funny.
But,
there's another thing about it that it allows kids to learn at their own pace, to learn different things. With school, there's this expectation that everyone will learn the same thing at the same time. And my kids learned to read pretty early on, but within the unschooling community, I've known lots of parents whose kids didn't read till maybe they were 10 or so. And then when they start to read, then they voraciously go after reading, often is what happens, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not always. Not everybody's into reading, but that's just an example of how, we expect people to learn certain things at certain times, but maybe they're not ready for that at that point in their life. But
that was certainly the case.
Trusting that they'll pick it up eventually.
That was certainly how it was in the Waldorf system, that kids would learn, like a bit later.
Yeah.
But then by the time they were age 10 or 11, they would be caught up and ahead because they had they hadn't lost the desire to want to read things.
Right.
So it's interesting. What type? Raluca wants to know what type your kids are, and
they are they're manifesting generators, and they are 5-1s. Just like.
Wow. all 3 of you are 5-1s.
Yeah, I've just taken a brief look at their charts so far, but yeah, it's interesting. We're all 5-1s.
Do something you might want to check out, if either of them have the 2034 channel, which is the one that goes from the sacral directly to the throat.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a distinction in human design between, you may have come across this one, between Ra says a generator with manifesting potential versus a pure manifesting generator. So you could
Okay.
have someone who's, you know, maybe they've got the sacral, and then it goes through the G center and it goes to the throat. So that's someone who's obviously a generator, and they've got manifesting potential because they've got a motor connected to the throat.
Mm-hmm.
So the only pure manifesting generators are the ones that have that 2034 channel, which
Okay.
let's pull your chart up again, because it's got a very interesting synergy with the 2343. So if you imagine that the sacral energy has direct access to the throat, it's that 2034, can you see it down the side, from the throat down the side straight into the sacral?
Okay.
And it's a very, very individual. The people I've met who have that channel they're just very much about being them, and they're not really interested in fitting in with other people. They're just like totally individual. Now, the interesting thing about that channel, there's a few things. It's formed in opposition. So 23 and 43 are opposite each other on the I Ching. If I show you you've probably seen the
Yes.
red mandala here. So 2034 are opposite, as are the 2343. But Ra said that 2343 channel, there it is. So it's like the 43 is like about 115 up at the top right, and the 23 is down at the bottom about 715 or whatever.
Okay.
The 2343 can be a great guide for that 2034. And there is that special relationship with the projector and manifesting generator, where when there's that invitation that there can be, it can be very powerful. Do you feel invited by is that how it works with the unschooling? Do you feel like your kids invite you to guide them? How does it work practically?
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I guess they do. I'm not. It's an interesting aspect of finding out that I was a projector. I'm not necessarily. I don't feel like much of a guide. So it's something that I'm reckoning with. With being a projector and maybe that's something that'll come later, or maybe that's something that just manifests more in a more subtle form for me.
I have a feeling, I don't know logically, but I just have a feeling that it probably happens on an energetic level without you necessarily even going, oh yes, I'm being a guide.
I think you're right. In this family situation, it's probably just second nature, and
almost invisible. You know, I think that's what we're saying about the yin centers, that they have that capacity to guide, those 6 centers especially.
Yeah.
I mean, the basic thing with a manifesting generator or a generator and a projector is, because we don't have life force energy, we learn to be very efficient with our energy, and we can then guide. You know, manifesting generators can get burnt out, but we have to develop wisdom, the wisdom of the open sacral. For us as projectors is, hey, we can't just throw everything at a problem or situation. We need to be intelligent with how we use our life force.
Right.
And that creates wisdom that, of course, we're then ideally placed to guide generators to help them to find their satisfaction in what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But it may be happening just because of who you are, you know, like rather than sitting down.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting, this aspect of this concept of the energetic guiding, rather than what I would traditionally think of as a kind of counselor guide.
Right.
So I'll have to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I find sometimes I'll come across these ideas and then I'm like, maybe. And then later on, I'm like, damn, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how is the 5-1 profile? How do you experience the 5-1 profile?
Well, so the one made sense to me immediately.
The investigator.
The investigator. I really relate to that one, and yeah, and it's my digging into human design is an example of that, where yeah, I just want to get to the bottom of things, and so take in as much information as I can. The heretic, I am trying to figure out how that plays out in my life, and I'm not really a soapbox style heretic. I'm not into telling people the harsh truths or anything like that, which I see on the Facebook human design pages all the time. Heretic will show up and say, "You all need to face the truth and get your head out of the sand." And I'm here to tell you, but I don't relate to that. I mean, I think I'm more of a quiet heretic, and I just how that takes shape in my life is through doing things my own way, I think. I don't know. There's other aspects of it that don't necessarily relate to the word heretic, like the bit about people projecting onto me. I've experienced that. Also the being burned at the stake kind of thing. I tend to experience that at work more. I'm an accountant, so sometimes I have to deliver results that aren't what people would like to hear.
Right.
Some harsh financial truths, maybe. And so I feel vulnerable to I call it killing the messenger syndrome.
Right.
Instead of accepting the message and saying, okay, what do we need to do about this? I'm vulnerable to this action of, well, maybe the report's messed up, or yeah, maybe we can't trust this data.
We don't like this data. Can you give us some other data?
Yeah. We'll sit this one out until the next.
So, let's wait till next month or quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I'm a 3/5, so I have the fifth line on the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Relucas 5/2, right? So yeah. So the fifth line is I definitely feel that the fifth line has the capacity to influence other people. That it has the capacity to, yeah, like charisma is a word that I feel fits.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this thing for me. I feel it's like people see things that aren't necessarily anything to do with me, so they look at me like, oh my God, wow, this is amazing, and they maybe have all these expectations that are not really anything to do with anything that I've said or anything that I'm offering or anything. And it's like all these expectations, and it's like, yeah, you're wonderful, you're amazing. And I'm like, well, hang on, I'm just a dude, you know. Then, of course, you know, because it can feel quite nice when someone thinks you're so amazing to start with.
Yeah, then, based on nothing.
Right. Like, oh, wow, maybe they really see me, you know. And of course, as a projector, I want to feel seen and recognized.
Of course.
And I have to very clear bullshit detector with, you know, are they really seeing me, or is this just a projection? Because then the flip side comes, you know, the more I've soaked up the adulation, then the harder it is when they realize that I'm just normal, or then they're like, you're terrible, you're the worst person in the world, and you're so rude, and you know, it's like, I have to kind of try and just sort of stay equally level both ways around. Oh, you think I'm amazing? Okay, well, what does that say? You know, it's probably your stuff. And oh, you think I'm an asshole? Okay, well, that's probably your stuff. You know, I'm just me.
Yeah, and then you throw in that Genius to Freak channel and in with all of that, and yeah, you can really get that reaction.
Do you find that too? Timing, that, you know, if you get the timing right, it can be great. If you get the timing wrong, it can be like they're looking at you like you're weird.
Yeah, in my work throughout the years, people have often said to me, I don't know what it is that you do, but I know that you're very good at it. So that's an example of, I don't know, I do feel I am good at my work, but I feel like that is some of that projection.
That's definitely recognition there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, having that. Yeah, that's a nice compliment, isn't it? It's like, well, we don't know what you do, but we need
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raluca just said that the 5 might be more evident in your lifestyle from what you shared. Doing things your own way, unschooling your kids might be an example.
Yeah.
And she also finds for her personally, it helps to know that it's a projection when, when she gets the adulation or the opposite, it's, may or may not be something to do with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, neat. Well, I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would like to, is there anything you want to share about your journey or ask about your chart?
I'm curious about my cross.
You've got, was it the unexpected?
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
I think that from memory, I've got a friend with this one, and we always joke, and it's there's something in one of the descriptions about having the right home, the right car, the right handbag for all
Right.
this. So we joke about it being the cross of the handbag. But that's probably a bit less relevant here. What's your sun gate? If you look at the top right of your body graph, you're left angle, so there'd be 2 different versions. So you're born on gate 8, right? So if you look at the top of the black, it's 8.5.
Yeah.
So then I'll show you this. You may have seen this website before. It's one of those
Human design.
unofficial ones.
Yeah.
It's the only place I know that has a full list of all the incarnation crosses.
Yes.
So it's Love Your Human Design, and we go down to gate 8. This one's not chronological order. It's ordered by the sun gate, make it easier to find. So if you look on the left column, it's going 4, 5, 6, 7. We go down to 8. Now you're a 5-1, which is a left angle cross. See, if you have 8-14 and it's a right angle, it's contagion. 8-14 juxtaposition is contribution. That's for the 4-1s. And here's yours, the left angle cross of uncertainty. So it's got that gate 8, gate 14, gate 55, and then gate 59. Okay. So 2 of those gates are on the sacral, 14 and 59, and the 55 is on the emotional. That's the gate of spirit we were talking about earlier. So the energy of your cross provides you with a desire to get the right house, the right plot of land, and all sorts of nice things. The underlying uncertainty of the cross is in the question, do I have the right house, car, land, purse, shoes, etc.? All people with the left angle cross of uncertainty have the 55th gate, which represents melancholy and the way from joy to sadness and back. The trick of living this cross is realizing that the sadness to joy is a swing and always will be. Knowing that when you're feeling melancholy, the joy is coming. It's through this awareness and focus that you bring happiness to your life. As your decisions are right over time, you know that you've made the right choice. So all of the individual gates have this aspect of melancholy. And interestingly, I think that 8, 14, pardon me, and 55 are all melancholy gates. They're all in the circuitry. So
I have 8 melancholy gates.
8 melancholy gates out of 17.
Yeah.
So though that can be very powerful to, it's like we were saying earlier about the coming and going of energy. Of course, as a projector, we have that more so, but then all of these particular gates and channels have that coming and going. All of these gates as well for you are, your 8 is on your throat, isn't it?
Yeah.
So gate contribution is on your throat. That's in the middle of the throat, opposite gate 1. Actually, that's an interesting one. I don't know if you've looked into that gate, that channel of 8-1, but it's the gate 1 is very creative, and gate 8
Yes.
captures that creativity and kind of amplifies and shares it. So that's an interesting one. With as an artist, do you paint or sculpt, or what?
I do a little of everything. Yeah, I paint, sculpt, carve. I record music, and yeah. So I dabble in lots of things.
You're pretty cool for an accountant, right?
Well, that's just my side. Accountant. That's just how I make money. You know.
You're an artist who does some accounting rather than being an accountant.
Yes. I never set out to be an accountant. I was invited. So,
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Interesting. The gate. If we go back to, do you know much about gate 14? You might enjoy this one.
No.
So gate 14.
Oh, gate 14. Yes. Let's see.
And it's the power skills. Now, if you ever look at the penta, is when you have people coming together. Have you heard of the penta in human design?
I have, yeah.
Small organizations. So Ra shared something about the 14 in the penta. It's one of the key gates for material resources in the penta. So you may find this in the work that you do as an accountant. I think you're in a cooperative. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Right. So even if it's not something that you're materially, physically, visibly doing, gate 14 is one of those that's essential for abundance and having lots of money, obviously, and other physical resources in a penta. Gate 14 is huge. It's very key there. So Ra was talking about situations where he'd worked with companies that had fired some guy who was dossing and not doing any work. And that person got ejected from the organization, and then they didn't have any gate 14, so they started to struggle financially. So he was saying that even though this person didn't output much, their having the gate 14 was making a big difference within that penta to that organization. Now, you actually have gate 14 activated 3 times. So so it's obviously your earth, so it's the second one down, that's the earth gate.
Yeah.
Then you also have it on your south node, 14.1 on the left, and then in red, 14.6. So you have it in both of your south nodes.
Money isn't everything, it says.
Money isn't everything. That's the first line aspect of it. So each of the different lines has an aspect. It sort of brings out a different flavor of that gate. So you've got humility. Well, you've got money isn't everything from the first line. The potential for arrogance on the 5th line, and then humility on the 6th line. So you've kind of got it mostly covered.
Yeah.
The south node is to do, if I understand correctly, it's to do with like direction, career, purpose, that kind of thing. And the south line is like where you've come from. So, sorry, the south node is where you've come from, and the north node is where you're going to. Yes. I don't fully have those integrated yet, but there's something that you might want to look into.
Well, sort of how they are in astrology too. It's
right.
Sort of like past and future karma.
Right, from the astrology. Now, what's very interesting here is, can you see you've got gate 8 and 14 3 times?
Yes.
So if we go back to, so you've got your sun and earth, obviously they're opposite, north node and south node on the conscious and the unconscious side. So you've got your sun gate is activated 3 times. So this is gate 14. You actually have a few that are, if we go back to this rave mandala view, because you've only got 17 gates in total, right? Because I was looking at your body graph, right, and I was like, wow, I can't find many black gates. And then I looked into it more, and can you see on the ring around this mandala? Can you see how like gate 14, it's got 3 different symbols next to it?
Yeah.
So your gate
Also,
43
28
also
also.
8 as well, right?
23 and 8 also have 3. Yeah.
Exactly. So you've basically got those 3 gates have 9 activations out of the 26.
Yeah.
So they're definitely gates worth studying. If when you start getting into all the gates, you probably have already. But so I've never seen anyone with so few different gate activations. So I've seen I've got 19 on mine. You've got 17. That's the lowest. So that's the most repetition of gate activations.
Yeah.
You've also got Pluto and Uranus on 47 and 64 are doubled up. But I just discovered this recently. This is the quickest way to kind of check out where you've got the repeats and stuff by looking at this mandala here.
Yeah, I saw your video about that. So
cool.
Yeah, it's very cool to see it this way.
Yeah, I got pretty excited. Yeah. Yeah, so that's another little interesting thing. But I guess at this stage, like for me also, a lot of these things I look at it and I'm like, okay, there's something to study in future. It's like a Christmas present I'll unwrap at some stage in going forward.
Yeah.
What's been the most challenging thing for you about finding out you're or living as a projector? What's been your biggest challenge?
Well, I guess waiting for invitations. It can be challenging. Maybe not so much even waiting, just resisting the urge to take action instead of waiting. So I guess that's the other side of waiting. But yeah, it can be very, very difficult, especially when people are giving you advice to take action. Yeah.
So people are saying like, go ahead, and you should do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. Stop waiting. Take some action. You wait too much. That's. I think that's the most difficult part. But
it's almost like you can see the conditioning at play there, can't you? Of being a projector, people expecting you to be a generator or a manifester, and also the 5th line right there. That they're seeing things that may or may not be something to do with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. And what do you love most about being a projector?
I don't know. I like that sense of the penetrating aura. When I read about that, I knew that feeling, and so I like recognizing that that feeling, and I feel like I recognize it in others too. Like there's times when I'm out and about and I'm maybe in a busy store or something, and all of a sudden I'll make eye contact with somebody and there's a connection there, and I'll, now I wonder what's going on there. Is this person a projector? Because there's a knowing. It's not just like, oh, I see you. It's kind of you see something deeper for a second. And
you recognize something in the other person.
It's kind of like my friend who was the person who first told me about HD was like, I know you're a projector. So that's kind of fun, looking for other projectors.
I have this feeling.
I mean, that's what
you're
part
at
of
a
the
party.
appeal.
Go ahead. You go first.
Okay. It's just something valuable about these online groups, that are only projectors. And I've seen people criticizing it, saying, oh, it's why are we just hanging out with our own types and everything? But there's something valuable about that safe space of connecting with other projectors. It's funny for me because I wonder, do the other types, I know they have their groups and stuff. Do they hang out and talk about these things to the same degree as projectors, or are projectors just more obsessive?
Well, we're waiting, aren't we? So we've got plenty of time. But my friend who's a manifesting generator, she was saying that in there they're all just about getting on with doing shit. And Ra said that, I don't know if you heard the audio where he talked to a group of manifestors, but he basically said it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of his life, because he's a manifester and he got all these other manifestors together. And, I think generators really enjoy being together as generators.
Yeah.
And they've got that enveloping aura where they kind of, can work really well together. And whereas I think manifestors, like I thought projectors were a bit lonely as a type, but manifestors even more so. But they're really designed to hang out with loads of other people the whole time. It sort of feels a bit like eagles fly alone as a manifestor. They're kind of like, because they're just doing their own thing from what I can figure out. But I mean, I think the groups all have their own flavors.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. Because
there's a
I went in and I went straight into projector groups, and then, so that's really all I know at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because as a projector, we are all about the other, but we got to get ourselves figured out a bit first. And I think that we have one of the toughest deconditioning journeys of all types, because we can be so heavily conditioned, like you were saying, feeling like you should be doing something, or feeling like you should be getting out and make something happen, or taking some action that isn't necessarily, what's true for you. Yeah.
Or going to be successful. So
I mean, human design's great, isn't it? It starts off with the not self stuff. It's like, they don't say, oh, you're here to be successful as a projector, watch out for the bitterness. They're like, right, projector, not self, the bitterness.
Yeah.
And then find out later, once you kind of, and the generator's all about frustration,
Yeah, well, it's been very helpful for me to recognize the bitterness as bitterness from the not self, and then I can move on from it more quickly at times when I see, oh, this is just the not self. Then I can, I can stop wallowing in the bitterness sooner. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, you're feeling bitter. What now?
Yeah.
I was thinking a bit earlier, like, there was quite a lot of energy. We were both very excited at the time. It feels a bit like, you go to a party, like life is a party, right? And you're there, and then all of a sudden there's someone kind of like gives you a little tap on the shoulder and says, hey, you're a projector, you can come in this special room over here. And then you're like, oh wow, here's just people chilling out, and doing and it's like, hey, you're special, you're allowed to come in this VIP room of projector of the world. And I think it's definitely very powerful when we first start coming back into, actually you're not here to do work, and the whole deconditioning. And I feel also, with what you were saying about people giving you advice, I find a lot of projectors have generators around them who are giving them advice, and it's actually not based on them being seen. It's based on the generator view of the world is, well, everyone should be doing what we're doing. And because there's so many generators, for a lot of people, it can work. It's like, come along and shackle up to, doing your day's work. And so the advice that comes from a generator can, unless they're very, very switched on, can be just another form of conditioning. Whereas when we get to a stage as projectors where we can really see that, we'll be like, oh, hey, that may work for you, but I'm in this room over here where we chill out. I'm a projector. And actually the irony is that ultimately we're here to guide the generators, right? Not the generators being here to condition us to be generators. So, but I guess it takes that time to, you know, first of all, to know ourselves well enough, like Raluca's just saying here. She says she feels really unseen when her generator friends give her advice on how to do things their way. She just gets to notice it and let it go now. And it's like generators are here to teach others by being themselves. So they'll share what works for them, which is generous, and it may or may not work for you or for me as a projector or for Raluca. So, and I think that's nice to be able to say, hey, I can, you know, like, you know, you get that thing where you're like, well, this person's well-meaning. I can tell they're trying to help, but I'm just, you know, it'd be like if you're in a club and they were all like four-wheel drive enthusiasts, and they were teaching you how to repair some aspect of your transmission so that you get back out and go driving in the dirt. And you're like, yeah, but I've got a Ferrari, you know, it doesn't to drive all the time. I just leave it in the garage most of the time, and I'm not going to put drive transmission in my Ferrari because it doesn't fit, you know. I've tried that once and it was a disaster, you know.
Yeah.
Because they only meet other four-wheel drivers, they think, you know, they assume that, you know, everyone else is going to be doing the same four-wheel driving or whatever, you know. It's nice, isn't it, to know we don't have to be the same as everyone else.
Yep.
I mean, even within generators, they're not all the same as each other anyway. So, you know, you can have a generator with just 2 centers defined who's very, very open, like, you know, they've got 7 undefined centers, like Raluca, or you've got 6. And then there can be a generator or manifesting generator with 9 defined, you know. So it's like, well, different from one to another. Tell me what is there an aspect of human design that you're excited to learn more about, that you're
let's see. Well, I'm exploring all these, you know, the motivation and transference. I got into that.
Motivation,
fear. Yeah, which is another one of those word traps, I think. Because you think about it, as long as I'm motivated by fear, then I'm okay, right? So I don't know. I had a sort of small epiphany through a Facebook group discussion about it, where it helps me to think of it more as safety or security, which goes in line with my cross too, I think.
Right, I'm thinking that, yeah.
As long as I'm forwarding my safety and security, then I'm good, right? Is that how you understand fear? Or, I mean, because I don't want to live in a state of fear all the time and have that be correct. So that's what I'm, you know, but the transference side is interesting then, because if I feel like I need something, then that's a clear signal that that something's off. And because and I have a negative feeling when I feel needy, you know, so it's been interesting because I've heard a lot of discussion, because you have the opposite, right?
I'm the other way around, yeah.
Yeah. So that makes a little more sense, you know, if I feel like I need something to make it right, then it works. But if I'm afraid, then don't act out of that way. But to think of acting out of fear as a positive, it's challenging to find the right way to look at it.
Yeah, what I like, the description I like the best that resonated for me was that it's like, what do I need in order to be in service to the tribe, you know, to my people, to do what I got to do to be here for, you know, what do I need? So kind of like the idea of getting a new computer, it's well overdue to get a new computer, but the idea of getting a new computer because I want to have a new computer, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. But the fact of like, actually, these videos have come out sharper and look better. Actually, yeah, I really need to get that sorted out because it's cramping my style a bit.
Yeah.
But Russell was on last week, and I don't know if you saw that one, but he was talking about.
I did.
You know, he said how transference is the way in. So to notice when you're in transference.
Sort of like focusing on the not self first, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. I think you know, for us as projectors, we've got to be ready for lots of years of that stuff, and then that's why it's so hard, isn't it, as a projector to be like, actually, oh, damn, all this not self stuff.
Yeah.
Although Ra did say that with manifestors that, you know, most manifestors are too angry to even do any self-development or come along to any kind of seminars. maybe the stats are wrong, you know, maybe they say there's only 8% based on charts that have been done, but maybe there's, like, you know, millions of manifestors who are just too angry to look up their charts or something.
Yeah.
It certainly makes it more fun to be able to have a laugh about it. And
yeah. So I'm interested in looking at more combined charts, like with my children and stuff like that, and to look at those connections. What is activated in those relationships, and that's very exciting to me, and interesting.
Do you know what authority they have? Are they sacral or emotional?
They're emotional, both of them.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
So riding that emotional wave of, yeah, cool.
And yeah, I'm interested in that aspect of the melancholy, though they mentioned it in the Love Your Human Design page that talks about the cycle of melancholy, and so that's something that I'm exploring too, is learning that to see that as a wave, because when you're in that melancholy phase, it can feel very low, and so just seeing the cycle and knowing that it'll come back around, which it always does. That I felt that was very true for me. That it's a cycle. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't. I don't get stuck in the melancholy forever. It may take a few days or something, but
Do you find that, especially as a creative person, that, like, you know, it's like the flip side of when you have some brilliant genius idea come through, that then there's other times when there's nothing? Do you match it up to being creative?
Somewhat, yeah. Sometimes that melancholy feeling will really fuel the creativity, but
Right.
Other times it's just flat. You know,
Right.
it depends on if I can find the nuance to turn it to something creative, or if I'm just so down that I don't even want to do that. Yeah.
I really like this. This has been a conversation we've been having, like, more and more with some of these chats and in some of the groups, where it's kind of like, you know, this whole thing of, like, I've got no energy, therefore something must be wrong. And it's, I mean, I had a pretty melancholy week, and I know earlier in this week I was just like, there was no energy, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, well, I've been through this cycle enough times to know it's just a bloody cycle, and it's like the energy's going somewhere else, and it'll come back in some beautiful way at some point. Who knows when?
Right.
But still, there's this part of me going, you know, it's this part that looks in the future for me, and it goes, I've got no energy now, so what if I never have energy and never have any energy ever again?
Right.
And it's like, and it feels terrible. But I'm really happy that we're having this discussion with so many people are sharing their experience of this, because, you know, let's face it.
Me too.
You know, I don't care if you're a hyper generator manifestor. No one has energy the whole time. It comes and goes. And, you know, only when we have this expectation that we should always have energy, then it's very easy for people to be like, oh, well, I must be depressed because I haven't felt like, you know, I've got no energy, so I must, and I often have no energy, therefore I must be depressed. Well,
right.
Maybe you're just to get to with some melancholy gates. And, you know, I'm sure that for some people it may be helpful to have a diagnosis and to maybe even have medication or, you know, have special with this. But I love that we have an alternative possibility of maybe it's just some melancholy. You know, maybe it's just a bit of winter time for your being, and it'll come back sometime.
Yeah. I've really been inspired by the discussions around it. So I think it's a good topic to explore further too. And all the types of melancholy, right? Because the gates all have a different aspect of it. Right?
Yeah, there's so many different ones. Yeah.
So that's some of the details that I look forward to getting into.
It can be mapped out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that gate 14 you've got 3 times, right? So
Yeah.
did you see the diagram for the melancholy?
I did, yes. I have it printed out somewhere.
You got that, so you can go through and
Yeah.
map your own.
That's how I went through and found that I had. At first, I thought I had 7, and then I discovered I had an 8. So
You found another one. Yeah. So what's 14? So gate, I've got them here. Gate 14 is melancholy about having to work or not.
yeah.
So you got that one 3 times.
Yeah.
Gate 8, gate of contribution, melancholy about no one paying attention to you.
Yeah, I know that one.
Gate 43, melancholy over inefficiency.
Yeah.
23, frustration over not being able to explain oneself clearly.
Yeah.
And then you have 3 or 60 down the bottom there. On the route, you've got one, haven't you, down there?
Yes.
I think you've got gates. Let's see.
60.
Is it 60, is it?
Yes.
So that was melancholy about having nowhere to go. What else have you got? That's most of them, isn't it? You got 22, same as me, and 55. 55, emptiness leading to potential eating disorders. That's quite specific.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting because I don't know, I wouldn't be described as having an eating disorder, but I do have anxiety around food and sort of I'll overeat as a form of security because I will worry about having a physical response to not having enough food, and this is something that I deal with. So one of these ongoing health issues, sort of a neurotic eating pattern. I have to tell my mind, I don't need any more food right now.
About. What's that now?
Oh, I'll just have to tell my mind, you don't need any more food right now.
Yeah, right.
So I'm learning.
Well, I'm glad those are being useful. Those gates of melancholy, anyway.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, great. Yeah, and then you've also got gate 59, which is it's definitely worth looking out. You were saying about relationships with others, looking out for where you meet someone with gate 6.
Yeah, I found that almost all of my prominent relationships have been with women with a 6. So
interesting. So then you get the sacral and the emotional center defined then.
Yeah.
And how has that been? Is there anything you want to say about how that experience is?
It just seems to be part of the recipe for connection for me, I guess. I don't know. Just going for it. I can feel that. I can feel that when that channel is activated.
Cool.
So, yeah, I went back and I looked at a lot of past relationships and sort of ran charts to the best of my ability, and I found that that 6 is almost always there.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah, it's so cool when you see these patterns. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, neat. Well, we've covered quite a lot. Is there
sure
anything
have.
you wanted to share, or any hopes and dreams, or anything that you
No, I think
said a lot.
Yeah, I think we got everything out on the table there.
Awesome. Well, I know people are going to enjoy watching this, and it's been fun actually. Like our ratio of male to female interviewees has I think has tripled in the last 2 weeks. So it's great to have some more men sharing about you know, our lives, and
Yeah,
so you know, I just think it's cool to have, you know, everyone's so different, aren't they? You've watched a few, I think you've watched most of the videos, and it's like
yeah, I have.
everybody experience is so different, but then we all have this common thing of being a projector and waiting for invitation. So
Yeah, I find something in all of them that resonates with me. So yeah,
cool. Well,
vision
thanks for
too.
supporting
It
and
is.
watching, and being in this this experiment. And yeah, Raluca's saying thanks as well. So cool. We'll wrap it up there.
All right. Well, thank you
Oh
both.
well, Bill, great to meet you.
Great to meet you too.
See you soon.
See ya.